won that hand.
Right.
Because the game is talk condescending to you.
Right.
Like, why is it a competition to you when all these people are dying?
Right.
And he said, people are dying all over the world. If you want to know why, you should ask China. That's a good answer to a question that's a gotcha question, but then she makes it racial.
I know.
Because it wasn't necessarily
racial. He did
racial.
come in with a hard ch.
He did China, but he does that.
China.
But that's still not racist.
I know. But
so if he was talking to a white man,
yeah,
and the white man said that to him, and he said, you should ask China,
sure,
he would say the same thing.
Yes.
It's just the worst case scenario that question gets asked by a lady with a mask on who's Asian.
China.
And then she gets mad and she takes the mask off. Let motherfuckers know she's not even playing by the rules anymore.
Yeah.
Are you racist?
It is a beehive of an environment there. It is,
but it's also, I don't know if that's helping anybody, like to chastise him, and to get him riled up, and I don't think it's helping anybody the way he's biting.
No, it's a complete breakdown of what that
used to be. Yeah. It's not what it used to be. It's like this weird gotcha competition, and then him getting pissy.
Yeah,
and him the fact that he stormed off like that.
It's a TV show. We're watching a TV show. We're not watching the adult telling us if it's going to be okay.
You're so right. And during a pandemic, that is the worst time for some shit like that.
It's the worst. You just want some consolidation of real information. Just tell me how to feel.
Dude, I remember after 9/11, people hated Bush. They thought he was really dumb and he couldn't spell.
Yeah.
And then, that was Dan Quayle. But that was his insurance policy, right?
Yeah.
Dan Quayle was so boring.
No, but people hated Bush going into that.
They hated him.
Hated him.
But then after 9/11, he had some speeches that made even people that I knew that were hardcore liberals like, all right, I love this guy. I love what he's doing.
It's a moment when you rally.
Yeah, but he really rose to the occasion, too.
Yeah.
George Bush, after 9/11, he gave people a sense of comfort.
That's right. That's what you want. You see people craving it. We're craving it. That's why when Cuomo and Newsom speak, and they just give you reassuring, very, very controlled. This isn't people gravitate. You're just like, okay, you just want to hear that. You just want to. Giuliani was the same way after 9/11. It was like, okay, you're making me feel better.
That made Giuliani's reputation the way he handled it, like a leader.
100%.
Yeah, it's
you don't pit people against each other in a tragedy.
But it's unfortunate that he can't see that, and he keeps getting caught. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like he's boxing with someone who's piecing him up. Like these things keep happening, so he keeps having these exchanges where these like heated exchanges and words get said, and
it's bizarre.
Well,
it's
the
really
last
strange.
One was the one where he went off the fucking script, where he's talking about therapies.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get some disinfection that kills it in a minute.
And
we'll
the
put it in there. A cleansing.
You see the woman next to her, just like her eyes coming out of her head. She's taking deep breaths so she doesn't pass out in the middle of it. She was like, holy fuck.
So then after that, he responds that, he was sarcastic.
Yeah.
The reporters asked him, he said he was sarcastic. He should have said, look, I'm not a doctor. This is just an idea, because that's really what it was. It was like, I might have done that on a podcast. If I was, I'd have to be drunk.
You'd have to be drunk. You would have to be out of your mind. I've never seen you smoke that much weed.
I could get there. If you leave me alone long enough. I'll say something that dumb. I've said the dumbest shit of my life on this podcast high.
Not that high.
But here's the thing. What came out of it, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
There was an actual publicly traded biotech company that came up with an idea to get, when in intubated people, to get a ultraviolet light tube down through that into the lungs and illuminate, because using ultraviolet light you can kill bacteria, you can kill viruses, and that's one of the reasons why they have those things like SteriPens where you go backpacking. You can get some water out of a creek and you just use this ultraviolet light. It kills everything inside that water.
Right.
So they actually had this company, publicly traded company, put out this video on how this can be done. Well, their account was banned from Twitter.
Oh, really?
Because
is it a real company?
Yes, it's a real company. And they let him back eventually.
Yeah.
But this is how toxic this relationship with the president is.
Right.
Where the president says something on TV.
Yeah.
And then people go, what the fuck did you just say? Get light into people? And then this publicly traded biotech company is like, actually, we've already been working on that. And this is the concept. And this is the science behind it, because UV light kills fuck you, you're banned. They banned them. Yeah. They banned a biotech company from Twitter. Now, they brought them back once it was explained to them.
Yeah.
But any other time in history, like say if this was going on, 10 years ago, and there was a virus, and the virus is infecting people's respiratory systems, and someone said, while these people are being intubated, we can actually stick a light through the same tube that the ventilator uses, and will illuminate the lungs. We could actually probably kill a good deal of this bacteria. People are like, oh, medical breakthrough.
Right.
And this,
but you've had a complete disintegration, right? Yep. That's the result of a breakdown, and that's what's been so. That's why it doesn't work in communist countries. Like, you can't trust the source for your information.
Right.
That's what we're at in a democracy, where no one can trust the source. We're all scrambling. Like, does this one know? Does this one know? Does this one know?
But it's a direct result of his toxic relationship with the press.
Yes.
Because people who are with him are so with him, and people who are against him are so against him. And it's almost like people with him, part of the reason why they're with him is because they're so against all these other fucking whiny, bitchy, liberal people that side's just so annoying.
No,
I'm going with Trump. He tells them to fuck off. That's my favorite part.
Right. He makes those people angry.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Man, it's a terrible relationship.
It's
bad for everybody.
It's awful, because if at any moment we should be uniting and taking care of each other, it's now.
Oh, I need a deep breath.
Beautiful bastards, hope you had a fantastic Wednesday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show on a day that I believe is the first day I've worn a dress shirt and pants in maybe 2 months. It's a big day for me. Thank you for being here on this momentous occasion. And a quick note, actually, before we jump into today's show, my podcast, A Conversation With, is officially back over at youtube.com/ACW with brand new content. And the first guest back is the fantastic Dr. Mike, which means, yes, we do cover some serious stuff, but a lot of this, just if you've been needing escapist content, you definitely want to watch and maybe even be a part of that conversation after today's show over at youtube.com/ACW. But with that said, welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. The first thing we're going to talk about today is why we have Red Lobster in the news. So apparently, Red Lobster was the restaurant of choice on Mother's Day, with videos and images shared on social media showing these massive lines of people waiting to pick up orders at several different locations, with many customers reporting waiting between 2 to 3 hours for their orders, while others walked away empty-handed asking for refunds. And though there were definitely angry customers at restaurants in New York, Illinois, all over the place, the angriest of them all seemed to be in Pennsylvania. In fact, at one location in the state, police were even called to try and keep things calm after the restaurant decided it had to shut down. And as you may have already seen online, there was a woman at an East York Red Lobster that became so angry that there was this whole incident that got violent. The video opens up with somebody saying, "Call 911, somebody." We then see an employee trying to force the angry customer out of the building. The woman then continues to try and push her way back in, demanding a refund.
Get my money back! You will get it!
Employees start talking about finding a key to lock the door as she continues to demand a refund. And at this point, there are now several workers at the front trying to keep her from entering. At this point, they tell her that all they need is her name to process the refund, so she shouts her name.
Happy Hill!
Which, side note, ended up making it even easier for people on the internet to start doxing her. And that back and forth continues. We then see an employee kind of nudge her away from the door, trying to close it. At which point, then Kathy escalates things even further when she smacks that employee in the face. That employee then starts fighting back, with others trying to step in to try and separate them. And after that fight's broken up, we see Kathy say,
I was assaulted and I have a whole crowd to you sinner! She's been shoving us on me the whole time!
At the end of the video, we hear someone off camera say,
"Paying customer, you got people out waiting for 3 hours for food."
And so that's the main reason we're seeing Red Lobster in the news right now. And regarding Pennsylvania specifically, under Governor Tom Wolf's orders, restaurants in Pennsylvania must either be closed or operate with a takeout or delivery system to minimize social contact during the pandemic. Also, customers at all establishments that remain operating, as well as their employees, are all required to wear masks to enter, which I will note, looking back to that video, that doesn't appear to be going well. You see people without masks, you see people with masks but not covering their mouth or nose, or at least just their nose. But really, that's a whole other side issue to this story and things that we're going to see in the future. Regarding Red Lobster and the issues at hand, we did end up seeing Red Lobster CEO issuing a statement on Tuesday apologizing to disappointed customers, noting that the chain had received significantly more orders than they've gotten on a single day and were unable to keep up. Also stressing that the company is working on making sure this never happens again. Also, in another statement to local news outlets, a company spokesperson attributed the issues to operational and staffing changes as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And finally, as far as that brawl at the East York Red Lobster, the company said, "We do not tolerate violence for any reason in our restaurant. We expect our team members treat our guests with respect, and we expect our guests to treat our team members with respect in return. We are grateful our manager and the guest involved were not seriously injured in the incident on Sunday," which really is an award-winning non-statement if I've ever seen one. They essentially said, "We are against bad things and people doing things that we do not agree with, but we are glad that nobody got hurt." Now, as far as everyone else's reaction to this incident, we saw people kind of in two camps. Some people saying we don't know what happened inside. Obviously, if you're waiting for your food for 2 to 3 hours and maybe the staff isn't properly informing you, you're going to be outraged. Also, as far as who started what on this side, you have people saying, essentially pushing her out of the store was the first act of aggression. But on the other side of this, and it appeared at least on social media to be the majority, a lot of people just found this woman to be in the wrong, right? Arguing that the employees want to give her her money back, but she's being belligerent. She actually swings at an employee, escalating the situation. A number of people calling her an angry Karen, which I will say that name is ridiculous. If anything, she's a Red Lobster Laura, or at the minimum, a Cheese Biscuit Betty. And as far as my opinion on this, based off of what we have publicly available right now, I end up feeling more sympathy for the employees here. We're living in weird times, and I think we have to pull back on how entitled we are and understand that everyone's kind of just trying to do their best. Right? If I was in this situation and I was having to wait 2 to 3 hours to get a Red Lobster order, I'm just canceling that order and getting my money back. I'm leaving. And when I looked at Twitter and I see there was an example of a Red Lobster employee tweeting, "Today was probably the craziest day at Red Lobster. We had 212 orders at once. People don't understand how busy we were today. 18 people called me a dumbass, 9 people flipped me off, 13 people told me to hurry the fuck up." Right? I can't help but sympathize with the employees here, especially as someone that used to work at restaurants. It's also part of the reason I truly believe that you get to know who a person is based off of how they treat restaurant staff. But hey, that said, that's the story, some of my personal opinion based off of what we've seen, and of course, I pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and Today in Awesome brought to you by Drop. And if you're looking for ways to stretch your dollar, especially right now, you gotta check out Drop. It's the free app that's giving away millions in cash rewards every single day. And with 300 plus brands to earn from, it is the fastest, easiest way to be rewarded for the shopping that you're already doing. Also, if you're not already using Drop, maybe you've heard me say it and you're like, yeah, I'll get around to it. Now specifically is the time to join, because from now until Sunday, Drop is running its Boost Week campaign, meaning you'll earn bonus cash back on select offers when shopping with Drop. And this includes brands like Apple, Sunglass Hut, Sam's Club, and many more. Also, for the next 72 hours, Drop is giving y'all 10,000 points, which is $10 when you download the app on the App Store or Google Play with code PhilDeFranco. Right, you do that and your bonus will be deposited into your account once you earn your first 1,000 points on the app. So with that said, head on over to earnwithdefranco.com or click that link down below to download the Drop app, and then make sure you use code PhilDeFranco to kickstart your earnings today. The first bit of awesome today is I made a TikTok because I needed another place to shitpost other than Twitter, I guess. And so if you'd like to follow me there to enjoy and or mock me, I don't really care, it's all equal. My username's simple, it's just Philip DeFranco, and you can just click that link down below. Then we had Daniel Radcliffe and Ellie Kemper entering the New Yorker's cartoon caption contest. National Geographic gave us Alien Oceans. Allure gave us a fitness instructor's entire routine from morning meditation to training so we could tell ourselves that we'll do it, but then ultimately will not do it. We had Troye Sivan collabing with Bon Appetit. We had the fantastic Swoozy giving us the Every Girlfriend Ever video. And the final bit of awesome is we got the full documentary for Dude Perfect Backstage Pass. And I will say, once again, I'm so happy that YouTube Originals are now not behind a paywall. And if you want to see the full versions of everything I just shared, the secret link of the day, really anything at all, links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about this story that's easily one of the most requested non-COVID stories we've seen of late. And at the center of this story, you have an entertainer who, among other things, has really been a YouTube staple over the past decade, Colleen Ballinger, aka Miranda Sings. And part of the reason this has been so requested by so many different people is because the accusations that have recently come against her include a number of things. Accusations including racism, fat shaming, joking about putting her dog down, which notably did happen when she was a child, but all of these accusations also seem to surface after she was accused of something much more serious, which was grooming a child. And that child is now 17-year-old Adam McIntyre. According to Adam, he used to be a huge fan of Ballinger. In fact, he said that he used to run fan accounts on Instagram and Twitter. But a couple of weeks ago, we saw him post a video titled Colleen Ballinger, Stop Lying. And in this video, he says that he first met Colleen back in 2016 at a live show when he was 13, saying he met her again at a show in 2018, and between this time, he says that the two became good friends. He says they were talking a lot on social media, and notably, during this time, she started to tell him private details about her divorce with Joshua Evans in 2016. Adam saying that his parents were originally supportive of Colleen interacting with him because he was such a fan, but then saying they started to become cautious, wondering why Colleen, who was 30 at the time, was sharing such private information with a minor. After that, that, Adam says that his relationship with Colleen turned into one where he was asked to look at drama channels to find out what they were saying about her, Evans, her ex-friends, and her fans. Also saying that his name ended up getting thrown into a lot of those situations and that he ultimately faced cyberbullying because of it. Adam claiming his parents encouraged him to distance himself, also saying that he did several times, but that he would always get sucked back in because Colleen would be nice.
I try not to be upset with myself because I was 13 to 15 during this time. I'm still really young now, I'm only 17, but looking back, it's hard to not get, like, fix yourself. You know, stop engaging in that. You're being used.
Also connected to this story, there was another incident between the two, and that is back in 2016, Colleen sent him a pair of women's lingerie. And this specific story starts with a live stream where Colleen and her friend Corey DeSoto were showing off ugly clothes they bought at Forever 21. And in that, DeSoto puts underwear on over his clothes as a joke. They're promising to send them to fans. One of those fans ends up actually being Adam.
Yeah, Adam, let me know what you want. He's in Ireland. Hi, Adam, I love you. Okay. I'm sending him something. Okay, maybe he'll want the panties. Although then his parents will be like, "You're not allowed to watch who is sending you panties." He'd be like, "Mom, don't worry. I watched a boy wear them online first."
And it would seem that even though she was joking about Adam's parents being mad, they were furious. Adam saying they took the underwear right away, but apparently they kept it because in his video, Adam says that he asked his mom to try to find them. She does, and he shows them as proof that she actually sent them. And notably, with this whole lingerie situation, it's a very large point of this story. It's something that Colleen has faced a lot of criticism for, and it's something we're going to come back to in a minute. But first, I want to hit on one of the last points that Adam makes. And that is that not only does Adam say that Colleen asked him to look up information about her ex-husband and her ex-friends, but according to Adam, she was also asking him for ideas to post to social media, with this allegedly including both her main accounts and her accounts as Miranda Sings. And he says this is because she didn't enjoy doing the Miranda character anymore since she couldn't be problematic as the character now. After that, he then says he stopped for a while, but said that he started giving more ideas on March 25th this year. According to Adam, she then starts tweeting some of his ideas. And with that, Adam says that he pitched about 15 different tweet ideas, one of those including a tweet where Miranda Sings comes out as a Meghan Trainor fan. With Adam saying that she was initially confused about it, saying that she wasn't sure what he was trying to say about Meghan. He then says he explains the joke, she gives him the green light, giving him the login info for the Miranda Sings Twitter account, saying that she still trusts him, and then Adam posts that tweet. Now, following that tweet going out, you had a lot of fans and others on social media accusing Colleen of queer baiting, right? Essentially accusing her of making fun of how scary and hard it is for so many LGBTQ+ people to come out. And Adam says that after that, Colleen sent him a message saying that she wasn't mad, just paranoid because, quote, everyone always gets mad at me and I always have to apologize. We then see Colleen delete that tweet, privately telling Adam that it wasn't his fault and that she was just too sensitive. Later, Ballinger messages him again, saying she felt overwhelmed by all the backlash she was getting for that tweet and that she still didn't know what to do. Colleen also telling him about how she apologized to one person, saying, the thing is, I agree with them. Queer baiting is not a joke. I'm super sad I've upset so many people. Now, with all of that said, that's just how this situation started. Following this incident, we started seeing the backlash and outrage against Colleen piling up. In addition to people sharing this, we also saw people starting to dig up her old videos, including one where she and her sister pretended to be two Latino women. In that video, it appears that they've darkened their skin, they have fake eyebrows on. Also in it, they sing about crossing the border, working at Del Taco, making burritos. People also sharing a separate video where they accused her of fat shaming because of how she talks about an overweight woman who sat next to her on a plane. Also in another clip making the rounds, you had Ballinger telling a story about how when she was 3, she dug her nails into the family dog. It yelps, bites her in the face, it was then put down. And so in this, she kind of jokes about how she murdered the family dog. Right, and those were the 3 biggest videos that resurfaced that were making the rounds, a number of them years old. I mean, for example, that video of her pretending to be Latina is actually 14 years old. All right, so you have all these different things, shots coming in from a lot of different sides, and then that ultimately brings us to yesterday because Colleen addressed a lot of these accusations. And in this video, she starts off with the claims that she was racist.
And the characters are completely based on racial stereotypes. It is not funny, and it is completely hurtful. I am so ashamed and embarrassed that I ever thought this was okay. I was a sheltered teenager who was stupid and ignorant.
Also saying that she went on to actually delete that video from her channel a few years ago after it was posted. Following that apology, she apologized for fat shaming that woman on the plane. Also explaining that she's a huge advocate for body positivity now, accepting and loving of all body types. After that, she goes on to clarify her comments about that incident with her family dog, saying that a doctor told the family that legally the dog needed to be put down, and this actually made her very upset at the time. This, even though the video in question appeared to show her being insensitive about it. So you had her addressing those 3 things, but the meat of this video really seemed to be her addressing that video with Adam McIntyre and the backlash that she's seen because of it. Now, as to why she didn't address this sooner, she said that McIntyre's mother reached out to her asking her not to speak his name, but now she said that it's gotten to the point where she felt that she needed to tell her side of the story. And with that, she talks about the context of why she sent McIntyre women's underwear when he was 13.
And in this live stream, I did a giveaway. I was giving away clothes clothes that were unused, tag still on, brand new, that I had just bought that I did not want. One of the items that was in this box was a really ugly pair of underwear. As soon as we pulled them out, Corey and I started laughing and joking around about how ugly they were. Why did I buy these ridiculous underwear? It was so stupid.
He then notes how people started asking for them. Adam then asks for the underwear. And no, the original video does appear to back up that claim, with Colleen going on to say that she actually forgot to send them, and so Adam asked again over Twitter, and that's when she sent them. And while she does note that she's always given away weird and random items, she says that she does now realize how inappropriate the whole situation was.
Giving away weird stuff. And so in my mind at the time, this was no different than all the other weird stuff I send to my fans as a joke. Now, in hindsight, I see how completely stupid of me. I should have never sent that. I don't know what part of my brain was missing at the time that I thought, oh, this is a normal, silly thing to do. It was never a sneaky, creepy, gross thing that I was doing in secret. It was a silly, stupid mistake that now is being blown way out of proportion.
Colleen also saying that she always believed McIntyre's mother was always very supportive about her interactions with Adam, and adding that if she had known his mother was uncomfortable with the situation, that she would have cut off contact. And after that, Colleen goes on to clarify her relationship with Adam and why she allowed him to tweet for her, noting that she has for years publicly asked fans for advice on what to tweet, then saying that she used some of Adam's tweets a few years back, saying that after that, Adam asked her multiple times if he could come up with ideas for posts, and saying that most of the time she actually didn't engage in those conversations until recently when he sent her a folder full of ideas. Sup, you beautiful bastards. Hope you've had a fantastic Wednesday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is this racism controversy that has just blown up on TikTok. Right, and so what we're seeing here in general are tons of teenagers coming under fire for videos that a lot of people have deemed racist as part of the new How's My Form trend. Right, and essentially the way this trend works is you have the person in the video seemingly offering advice or information to attract a specific kind of audience. It then cuts to a clip of now that I have insert blank's attention, with it then cutting to a heavily edited, often oversaturated clip of them imitating that person or group and asking, how's my form? Right, and so with this trend, there have been some tame examples that blew up, like that of David Dobrik. It starts off with him duetting a TikTok that says how to get out of the friend zone with your assistant. Then it cuts to the user saying, now that David Dobrik's here, can I get a Tesla? Right? Harmless, funny, makes fun of the fact that a lot of people think that he has a crush on his assistant and his longtime friend, and it references the fact that Dobrik gives a lot of cars away in his videos. But the problem with this situation is what we've seen is that many teenagers have used racist stereotypes while making their videos. I mean, some of the videos that have blown up also received a ton of backlash, like connecting Chinese people with eating bats, references to black people eating watermelon and getting arrested, references to Mexicans mowing lawns, jumping over fences, referencing Arabs sneaking bombs through security. And the thing is, in addition to the general backlash a number of these creators have faced, it seems like some online have made it their mission for these teenagers to face consequences. Some even going as far as doxing them, sharing information like their full names, schools, social profiles, even home addresses. Also, an interesting aspect to this story is because a number of the people who are a part of this trend are younger. The people using this app are younger. We saw an example where one teen who mocked black people in reference to 3/5 compromise, she faced so much backlash, this seemingly leaking into her personal life, that her father eventually forced her to post a video apology.
I didn't mean for it to come off as racist, even though considering the context of it, I didn't mean it like that. I was just doing a TikTok trend, and my actions aren't okay.
And in fact, because the backlash and the real life consequences have become such a big part of people posting things to TikTok, especially when it's deemed racist, we've actually seen people use the trend to target those people who end up getting backlash and real life consequences. And that last TikTok is actually in reference to a different racist video. And that video reportedly featured Stephanie Freeman and Jeffrey Hume, who are high schoolers in Georgia. And the premise of their video was that they were going to make N-words. Jeffrey also says the N-word in the video before mocking black people and saying they don't have dads. They say the watermelon fried chicken thing. Then going on to say that black people don't make good choices. Then going on to say that black people rob people, and specifically whites, yeah, they do that. And then finally mocking black people for going to jail. Now, in addition to there being overwhelming anger because of this video, they were reportedly expelled from their high school over this behavior. Hume, who's reportedly an independent wrestler, being dropped by wrestling organizations associated with him. Also, we've seen Freeman specifically facing even more criticism after people spread posts from an Instagram account allegedly run by her. In those posts, she appears to apologize, saying things like she believes blacks are humans too, begging people to stop trying to ruin her life. But I do want to note there, while that part has been heavily reported, it is unclear whether or not these posts are really coming from Freeman. There's also been a part of this story being spread around where internet people are apparently trying to get Freeman's college acceptance revoked. But there, I haven't been able to independently verify anything, and in fact, according to Heavy, the college people suspected she was planning on attending has said there is no record of her admission. And so, there's all of that happening right now. And as far as my opinion here, one, I'm not co-signing any of the doxing, death threats, and any general craziness. Right, that's not okay and generally horrifying. Two, freedom of speech is a thing, but that does not mean freedom from consequences. No one, generally, other than people that fit that same description, want to be associated with racist assholes. And understand, I am saying that there is a difference between jokes that go too far, people who don't really understand how heavy what they're saying hits, and then there's the overwhelming, disgusting racism that we witnessed in that last video. And finally, 3, don't be stupid. Stupid? When you post something on the internet, it does not exist in some different alternate world. It is just an extension of your real world. So what you do in one can have consequences in both. And understand, I say this hoping that the people that are in these stories, right, that there's growth there, right? Hopefully people are learning and it doesn't just drive them further into ugliness. And also understand, I say this not from a place where I'm holier than thou shouting from the top of a mountain down. I say this as someone who has constantly said, I hate the person I was years ago. Like, who I am today would want to beat the shit out of old me. And I'm thankful to the internet and also people close to me that have helped me grow, learn, evolve. But I've also made peace with the fact that not everyone evolves and you can't make people grow. Right? Because that's a personal journey. Only that person controls if their door is open or not. But yeah, with all that said, those are the stories, my personal takeaway, and of course I pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on this whole situation? But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and today in Awesome, brought to you by Keeps. And if you didn't know, and this was surprising to me, 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time that they're 35. You know what, everyone's got, that brother, uncle, even friend that's losing their hair, and if you don't want to go down that road, you don't have to just sit idly by. And with Keeps, you get treated for hair loss from the comfort of your home. You used to have to go to the doctor's office for your hair loss prescription, but now you can visit a doctor online and get FDA-approved hair loss products delivered right to your home. Their treatments are up to 90% effective at reducing and stopping further hair loss, and you also don't have to go broke to avoid going bald. Some of you may have tried these treatments before, but probably never for this price. And so if you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, you beautiful bastards can go to keeps.com/DeFranco, or just click that link in the description down below to receive 50% off your first order. And the first bit of awesome today is, I know I don't share a ton about myself on YouTube anymore, but I did want to mention today, 1, my son Trey turned 6 years old. For those of you who have been watching me for like that long, where does the time go? 6? That's just crazy. Also, Trey, if you randomly are watching your dad's old videos, you're not. You got better things to do. But if you happen to come across this one day in the future, I really do hope you know how happy you made me, how proud I am of you, and just how blessed I feel to be your dad. Being a part of you growing up has 1,000% made me grow up. Not completely, but everyday strides. Then in Awesome for Bucks and Tom Brady fans, we got the news that Rob Gronkowski is gonna go to the Bucks. He is officially coming back and has been traded. And I just want to say this as a very, very sad Jets fan. Do y'all not just let Tom Brady have a bad season? And I know some people are gonna be like, well, what about last year? Yeah, they didn't win the Super Bowl. They lost the wild card game, but they were 12-4. I understand. I say this with no hate in my heart. Like, I think that Tom Brady is the GOAT. But there was a part of me that just wanted him to see what the other half lives like. Then we had Phineas explaining how he builds songs for Billie Eilish. We got the trailer for White Lines. The New Yorker gave us the streets of Seoul, South Korea under quarantine. And hey, if you want to see the full versions of everything I just shared, the secret link of the day, really anything that I talk about, links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about why there's been such a focus on businesses in the news right now. And this is kind of on 3 fronts. And first up, we have an update and expansion on something we covered earlier this week, that of course around the Paycheck Protection Program. And there we talked about how tons of local businesses didn't receive any of this funding meant to keep companies afloat before that fund went dry. But at the same time, and part of the reason the funding went away so fast is you had these massive companies like Shake Shack receiving $10 million in funding. Though, as we talked about earlier, they announced that they would be returning that $10 million. And the thing is, now we have a much better and bigger picture about what other big and public companies have been receiving PPP funding. But unlike Shake Shack, it appears that so far they are keeping it. You had companies like DMC Global, a metalworking business with a market cap of $405 million, receiving $6.7 million from the PPP loan. You also have the likes of Wave Life Sciences and Mankind, both of which have market caps over $270 million, accepting $7.2 and $4.9 million. J. Alexander Holdings taking in $15 million with a market cap of 74. Other companies taking home $10 million or more included Fiesta Restaurants, Potbelly, Quantum Core, Hallador Energy. And also, one of the things we've been seeing is companies like Ruth's Chris figuring out a way to strategize how to get even more money. Right, these loans have generally been capped at $10 million per organization, but Ruth's Hospitality Group, which owns Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, was able to qualify for $20 million by seeking 2 separate loans for its 2 subsidiaries. And while they've gotten the most attention here, they're also not the only one. You have Brazilian steakhouse chain Fogo de Chao doing the same, right? And so with this, as expected, a lot of consumers are not pleased with these big companies. We've even seen a petition growing demanding that Ruth's Chris return their $20 million, saying many small businesses are now being told there is no money left for them and they cannot pay their employees and may have to close forever. And adding, this is a travesty and a disgusting display of corporate greed during a time of disaster. And as of recording this video, it has over 220,000 signatures, and of course it's still growing. It's also not just consumers who are frustrated. You had people like Representative Nydia Velasquez, who's the House Small Business Committee chairwoman, and she tweeted, "We need transparency transparency and safeguards to be certain that funds from PPP reach true small businesses. Big companies shouldn't use up resources intended for struggling neighborhood small businesses which are suffering so severely. But all of that said, there is some good news here. Like we talked about on Monday, there were new plans for more PPP funding that was in the works, and we've now seen the Senate pass a $484 billion interim coronavirus funding bill. And this time around, it does appear that there are a few things being done to help smaller businesses. Now, reportedly, the way that it's breaking down is you have around $310 billion set to replenish the PPP, and $60 billion of that is set to go to small lenders and community banks, another $75 billion going to hospitals, $25 billion going to testing expansions, and then $60 billion is going to emergency disaster loan grants, which will help communities in underserved areas. Now, as far as what happens from here, the House is expected to take a vote on this on Thursday, so we're gonna have to wait to see how that goes. And for the sake of conversation, let's say that it passes there on Thursday. It's quickly on Trump's desk, it's signed, it's all good. One of the big questions here is, will this round of money run out as quickly as it did the first time around? And here, I'll say, you can never perfectly predict the future, but we've seen experts saying that small businesses should not be shocked if the funding only lasts a couple of days. The first time around, 1.6 million applicants were approved. Right, the scale of what we're talking about is staggering. I mean, you had the Treasury Department even saying the SBA has processed more than 14 years worth of loans in less than 14 days. Right, even hearing those staggering numbers, 1.6 million, 14 years worth in 14 days, the thing here is we don't actually know how many businesses applied or even tried to apply. But the thing is that 1.6 million small businesses, that's just a fraction of the roughly 30 million small businesses in this country that employ close to half the country's workforce. Right, so it is incredibly likely that all these loans get gobbled up even without the big players trying to exploit the system. Now, with all of that said, the second bit of business news is also about the PPP loans, though this is between Harvard and Donald Trump. On the note that we just talked about, you have people requesting that companies give the money back, saying it's not meant for you. And yesterday, during the press briefing, we saw a reporter ask Steve Mnuchin if he was going to request that other companies give the money back, and there we saw Trump jump in.
I'm going to request. You're going to ask them to return that money?
Yep.
Yeah,
Harvard's going to pay back the money, and they shouldn't be taking it. So Harvard's going to. You have a number of, I'm not going to mention any other names, but when I saw Harvard, they have one of the largest endowments anywhere in the country, maybe in the world, I guess. And they're going to pay back that money.
And for some context here, if you're unfamiliar, Trump is referencing the fact that Harvard was recently given $8.6 million as part of the stimulus package. Now, the thing is, following President Trump saying this during the press conference, we saw Harvard take to Twitter to push back against the claims, saying Harvard did not apply for, nor has it received any funds through the U.S. Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. Reports saying otherwise are inaccurate. President Trump is right that it would not have been appropriate for our institution to receive funds that were designated for struggling small businesses, and then further explaining, like most colleges and universities, Harvard has been allocated funds as part of the CARES Act Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, and also saying that it will be directing 100% of those funds to the students, and adding that that will be on top of additional financial assistance it's already given to students for things like travel, living expenses, and the transition to online classes. And so for those unfamiliar with what they're talking about here, the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund is a fund in the stimulus bill that allocated $14 billion to help higher education. And under that fund, the Education Department said that thousands of colleges and universities will get that money, saying here that it will go to both public and private schools ranging from the Ivy Leagues to beauty schools. Right, and per the directions of the Education Department, about half of the money these schools get is supposed to go to the students, with the other half going to making up lost revenue and other costs related to the pandemic. And while Harvard is definitely the richest university in the United States with an endowment of around $40 billion, the money that they got from the fund appears to be in line with other comparable schools. This including those that have sizable endowments. Places like Yale, they have a $30 billion endowment and they got $6.8 million. Stanford, which also has an endowment of just under $30 billion, received $7.3 million. Other Ivy Leagues like Columbia and Cornell got even more from the fund, about $12.8 million each. But the way that this program was set up, the money isn't given out based on how much the money these schools already have. The way that it's set up is it's actually allocated based on a formula that takes into account the overall student enrollment and income level of that student body. And that was specifically measured by how many students at each school are receiving federal financial aid through federal Pell Grants. Right, and so looking at Harvard specifically, according to Harvard, 16% of their 6,600 undergraduates are Pell Grant recipients. So in the 2018-2019 academic year, the school gave $200 million in scholarships to undergrads alone. And that's why we also saw plenty of schools with less money getting bigger chunks of the stimulus as well. Right, for example, the biggest sum went to Arizona State University, which got $63.5 million. And that's because they have 83,000 students and about half of them are considered low income. Right, but with all that said, one of the main focuses with this story is that Harvard was the one that got a ton of backlash from others, not just Trump. And this included the likes of Republican senators like Rick Scott, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, even Education Secretary Betsy DeVos seemed to echo this sentiment, with a spokesperson for the department saying sending millions to schools with significant endowments is a poor use of taxpayer money, with the spokesperson also saying that DeVos had sent a letter to the college and university presidents asking them to send the money back if they don't need it. But also, with this situation, we've seen DeVos taking some heat herself. And that is in part because she's in charge of distributing an additional $6 billion from the stimulus bill that's separate from the relief fund. And this money is specifically earmarked to directly help college students pay for food, childcare, and housing. Now, on April 9th, we saw DeVos say that the $6 billion would be immediately distributed to the students. But according to a report that came out on Monday, right, just under 2 weeks later, only $6 million of that $6 billion had been given out. Which, I mean, that's not 1%. It doesn't even feel right to say less than 1%. It is 0.1%, right? And so that prompted a lot of backlash from leaders in higher education, many of whom said that they have been struggling with bureaucracy and lack of guidance. There were also reportedly glitches in the process early on, and according to reports, the website where schools submit documents would go down for hours at a time. And you also had some schools who hadn't used this portal before having trouble registering. But what we saw there is in a statement last week, the Department of Education spokesperson blamed the schools, saying it's tragic that at a time when students are struggling to make ends meet, too many highly capable and intelligent leaders of higher ed institutions are dragging their feet and claiming it's because there's some lack of clarity in the law. Also, just yesterday we saw DeVos issue a new guidance mandating that the money can only be given to students who qualify for federal financial aid, right? Meaning only U.S. citizens and some legal permanent residents are eligible, and the hundreds of thousands of undocumented students, right, people like DACA recipients, they will not have access to the money. They will be excluded because they are not eligible for federal financial aid. And we'll be keeping our eyes on this to see if anything changes, what happens with that $6 billion. And actually, as I was recording, we got the update that Harvard has now said that it is not going to accept that money, saying in a tweet that they're concerned that the intense focus by politicians and others on Harvard in connection with the program may undermine participation in a relief effort, and adding, for this reason, Harvard has decided not to seek or accept the funds allocated to it by statute. And notably here, that decision came just hours after Princeton also announced it will not be accepting the funding, and Stanford said on Twitter that they had withdrawn their application for the money on Monday. So the situation is changing very rapidly, a lot of it obviously affected by public and political pressure. So it's going to be really interesting to see if more schools will be pressured to do the same. You know, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below, but this also brings us to the final bit of business news, and that is business in Georgia. And understandably, a big chunk of this story revolves around Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who at the beginning of this month famously said,
"Those individuals could have been infecting people before they ever felt bad." Well, we didn't know that until the last 24 hours. And as Dr. Toomey told me, she goes, "This is a game changer."
And there, of course, as we've discussed in the past, that is just absolutely not true. Experts had literally said that for months, so it was either a bold-faced lie or he is the dumbest man in Georgia. Though, to be fair to Brian Kemp, it could be both. But that announcement, that statement from Kemp, that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is that on Monday, Governor Brian Kemp announced that the state would be reopening on Friday. And notably here, that would include reopening gyms, bowling alleys, tattoo parlors, barbers, hair and nail salons, as well as massage therapy businesses. With a second wave of reopenings coming a few days later on the following Monday, that including dine-in restaurants and movie theaters. And while those businesses will need to follow social distancing and sanitation guidelines, this is still the broadest rollback of stay-at-home orders that we've seen in a state so far. Because that order was so broad, you had a lot of small business owners saying they were caught off guard, they weren't expecting to reopen in the state so soon, some saying that it was so fast they need more than just a few days to ramp back up. And you also had others critical of the move in general, some saying that they'd refuse to reopen before health experts said that it was safe to do so. For example, we saw people like Diane Fall, owner of Maxim Barbers in suburban Atlanta, saying it's putting economics before lives. Kemp's putting it out there like he's doing us a favor, but I'd rather be alive than run my business right now. You also have people saying, how could they keep social distancing rules in place when you have places like a barber shop or a nail salon or the number of places where people have to be closed or use the same products over and over. We also saw examples like that of Alan Marsh. He's a pet shop owner, and he said that even though revenue is down a third, he's lost employees. He would continue to fill online and phone orders only. But also, Marsh specifically took it even a step further, saying that if he found out that one of his employees had been out to a restaurant or a shop, he would actually take them off the schedule. Right, but that said, as far as reactions, not all negative. You had other business owners welcoming the move, some saying they were cautiously optimistic about reopening. Owners like that noting, we're going to test this out and see. All it takes is one or two facilities that don't handle it well and will all be shut back down again. And with all that said, notably here, it's not just the business owners who were caught off guard by this decision. Reportedly, the mayors of Savannah, Augusta, and Atlanta all said that they hadn't heard Kemp's plan until he publicly announced it. And like many businesses, those mayors criticized Kemp's decision. With Atlanta Mayor Keisha Bottoms saying,
"I'm perplexed that we have opened up in this way. And again, I can't stress enough, I work very well with our governor, and I look forward to having a better understanding of what his reasoning is. But as I look at the data and as I talk with our public health officials, I don't see that it's based on anything that's logical.
You also had Savannah Mayor Van Johnson calling the move reckless, premature, and dangerous. But ultimately right now, those mayors actually have less power than the businesses themselves do with this decision. Right? And that's because Kemp's order will be implemented statewide, meaning that local governments can't overturn or restrict it. But that still hasn't stopped these mayors from continuing to urge people to stay home. With Albany's mayor also saying that he plans to ask Kemp to make an exception for his city. This because Albany has become one of the worst coronavirus hotspots in the country. Now with all of this happening, so many reactions, we saw Kemp defending his decision with a spokesperson saying, we can't have shelter in place forever, and we can't have how businesses operated last fall or even a month ago. We have to find a way to a happy medium. But also here, it is important to point out that even though Georgia is opening the fastest, it's definitely not the only state that we've started to see reopen. We also had Tennessee announcing that its statewide stay-at-home order will be lifted at the end of the month and that most businesses will reopen by May 1st. Ohio, for their part, planning to roll out a gradual reopening on May 1st. In South Carolina, as of yesterday, we're already seeing places like beaches and department stores reopen at reduced capacity. And like we've seen in Georgia, there has been criticism for opening non-essential businesses so early. However, unlike in Georgia, those municipalities can still restrict some reopenings, such as beaches. But ultimately, that's where we are with this story right now. And I will say, it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here, right? How states handle reopenings. And I mean, especially in places like Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee, because they haven't even met White House guidelines that recommend that states begin a phased reopening only after 14 days of a sustained decrease in coronavirus cases. And so with all of that said, of course, for everyone, I'd love to know your thoughts in general, but also more specifically, if you're living in one of the states that we're talking about right now on the show, I'd love to know your thoughts, your concerns, your fears, your maybe happiness of what's happened, right? The decisions being made to reopen the way that they're being reopened. And that is where I'm going to end today's show. And hey, if you like this video, you like the way that I break down the news with you each day, hit that like button. Also, if you're new here, definitely subscribe and tap that bell to turn on notifications. Sup, you beautiful bastards. Hope you've had a fantastic Monday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is we actually had Joe Rogan in the news. And for those that somehow don't know, Joe Rogan, of course, fantastically successful comedian, podcast host, poster of very, very sweaty photos. And right now, he's facing heavy criticism from people who are frustrated by his ability to obtain multiple coronavirus tests when people all over the country are struggling to get access. However, as his fans have noted, he's actually using non-FDA approved antibody tests. And as for how all of this came up, last Wednesday during an episode of the podcast The Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan spoke to comedian Chris D'Elia. And at the top of the episode, Rogan revealed that D'Elia had just tested negative for COVID-19.
Chris D'Elia's negative, yay!
That's right. I got the test.
Isn't it nice?
You know, I got the test because I know Joe Rogan.
And shortly after that, Rogan explained that he had actually been tested twice in 1 week.
I've been tested twice already. Got tested yesterday, and I got tested 2 days before that.
So, and
I'm just going to test myself every 3 or 4 days. Fuck it.
With Rogan adding that if he's going to have someone on the podcast, they're also going to have to be tested as well.
So I'm testing everybody. So the way we're doing this here is when people come in to do the podcast, test them first, keep the fuck away from them, and then give them a hug.
All right, so that said, the podcast happens, and then the following day, D'Elia talks about being tested before Rogan's show in an interview with Bill.
I went to do Joe Rogan's podcast yesterday, and I said to him, I texted him, I was like, are you still doing this? Should we do this? Or whatever. And he was like, yeah, I have a doctor here. He's going to test you first. So I was like, okay. And I got tested, and I was negative, but I was like, what if I was positive? You'd just be like, okay, gotta go home.
And there, the interviewer's first response to D'Elia was, how is Joe Rogan's podcast getting tests?
How is Joe Rogan's podcast getting tests?
Well, because Joe's paying for it. That's why. Joe's basically Bruce Wayne. That's why.
Unreal.
With Dr. Malkin telling Vice, there's about 70 companies producing antibody tests, and only one of them is FDA approved. That's Celix. I don't know how the hell they got that contract, that they got FDA approval, but it's impossible to get those tests. And adding, I give everyone a disclaimer. It's not FDA approved. You can't use this for diagnosis. It's more for peace of mind, for epidemiologic data. But if they need a definitive diagnosis, they have to get a nasal swab. And as far as how many people he has tested at the time of the interview, he said, I've tested about 300 people in the last week. About 5% of asymptomatic people turn up positive on antibody testing, and about 10 to 20% of symptomatic people have showed up positive on antibody testing. And everyone that was a known positive has shown up positive on antibody testing. Right, and so with all of that said, that's why you have a number of fans saying that the outrage against Rogan here is just misplaced. Right, it's not like Rogan is the reason other people aren't being tested. But once again, on the other side of this, you have people saying, well, it's not just that, arguing that it's not just Rogan, but anyone giving these non-FDA approved tests could be giving people false security, especially since experts have warned that tests have mistakenly flagged people as having antibodies when they don't. know. So to bring it back to Rogan, it is unclear how reliable this is. Now, as far as my opinion on this, I think the anger here is misplaced. Right, if Rogan was diverting N95 masks that were supposed to go to hospitals, sure, I'm on board. If he was exploiting some rich person Illuminati loophole that made it so that things that once again were supposed to go to hospitals but ended up in his hands, then yeah, maybe I'd pick up a pitchfork, though I do have a little Joe Rogan bias, I will admit that. I'm a weekly listener, I've been on the podcast 2 times a long time ago. But yeah, in general to me this feels like a headline that got away, which, hey, it is going to happen. Yeah, that's my personal takeaway, though of course I pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on this? You agree with me? You disagree with me? Why not? Let me know in those comments down below. And then let's talk about a story that involves those loans that the government is giving out to small businesses. And the thing is, there's been a lot of confusion, issues, controversies around this, right? Over the weekend we saw stories about how these loans were not making their way to more places. Also, a big controversy was that Shake Shack got $10 million from the Payroll Protection Program, but that place has 275 locations both in the United States and abroad and is publicly traded. You know, you had a lot of people saying that Shake Shack should be in no position to get this loan, right? It was designed to help small, struggling businesses. People pointing to the fact that it was supposed to be for businesses with 500 or fewer employees, right? If they have 200 some odd stores, they obviously have more employees. But it turns out they were actually eligible. It was for businesses with 500 employees or fewer, or chain restaurants and hotels with 500 or less employees per location. But before we go any further, the big news today is that Shake Shack has said that it will be returning that $10 million it received. Publishing a joint statement with Union Square Hospitality Group, which is an independent restaurant group in New York that created Shake Shack, who are also facing problems of its own as a result of the crisis in the PPP. With Shake Shack saying when this program was first announced, they didn't really know what to do about it. Writing, the PPP came with no user manual and it was extremely confusing. But adding, the best chance of keeping our teams working off the unemployment line and hiring back our furloughed and laid off employees would be to apply now and hope things would be clarified in time. Few, if any, restaurants in America employ more than 500 people per location. That meant that Shake Shack, with roughly 45 employees per restaurant, could and should apply to protect as many of our employees' jobs as possible. Also adding, they had quickly seen severe economic hits as a result of the virus. But on the other hand, things were more complicated for USHG, who closed all of its restaurants in March and had to lay off over 2,000 employees. Right? And so their position made them a little more unsure of what to do. Writing, since the PPP loans would be forgivable only if employees were hired back by June, and since most USHG restaurants are based in New York City, where that timeline is unlikely achievable for full-service restaurants, that application decision relied upon our conviction that one day we would be able to pay back the loan. After careful consideration, USHG opted to apply for PPP loans, taking on the risk in order to hire back laid-off employees as soon as possible. Right, so that was their individual situation, but one of the biggest situations for everyone else is that the supply was limited. Right, if you haven't already seen, it was announced that the PPP funding had run dry in less than 2 weeks. Right, so leaving them in a tough place, which was also something that their statement continued on, saying, if this act were written for small businesses, how is it possible that so many independent restaurants whose employees needed just as much help were unable to receive funding? We now know that the first phase of the PPP was underfunded and many who need it most haven't gotten any assistance, which it appears is in part why Shake Shack has decided to return their chunk of money, right, so that more places and more people can really get that assistance. And we saw both Shake Shack and USHG encouraging Congress to make it easier for restaurants in need to get help in a number of ways. First, by spreading the funding more efficiently so that it does not run out. Second, by assigning restaurants to banks so those who don't have pre-existing relationships are not left out. And third, by eliminating the June forgiveness date. And they said that they hope this strategy will give an advantage to smaller businesses because while Shake Shack so far is the only one announcing their plan to return PPP money, they were far from the only chain to get it. Potbelly Sandwich Shop, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, Kura Sushi, and many more with locations all over the place got a nice chunk of change, right? Ruth's Chris alone got $20 million. And meanwhile, you have people like April Richardson, who owns DC Sweet Potato Cake, a local bakery in DC, speaking to reporters saying her application to the PPP resulted in her getting nothing, right? And this is someone not trying to get millions, but rather just around $23,000. And because she didn't get it, she ended up having to tell 3 of her employees to file for unemployment. But all of that said, it does appear that there is some hope for these businesses because it appears that a new deal to get more funding is on its way. In fact, according to the Wall Street Journal, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is hopeful that Congress can get something agreed to as soon as today with a vote by Wednesday. And that deal would reportedly send another $310 billion to the PPP. It would also give $75 billion to help hospitals, $25 billion to expand testing nationwide, though there have been some holdups negotiated. Democrats have been after more hospital and testing funding, while Republicans have wanted to put funds for those in different legislation. But ultimately, that's where we are with this one right now. We're going to keep our eyes on it, see what happens with the legislation, also look into what other companies out there might give money back. It appears to be like most things right now, just an incredibly messy situation. But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and today in Awesome, brought to you by Bright Cellars. You know, honestly, with this extended quarantine, Bright Cellars has been incredibly clutch as someone that enjoys wine. And the thing is, whether you're a seasoned vet or you can't tell a Merlot from a Moscato, Bright Cellars offers fantastic wine selections curated just for you, delivered straight to your home, office, or wherever. And tailoring a wine selection specifically to your taste is simple and easy. Bright Cellars customizes each pick based on your answers to an easy 7-question quiz. And not only that, but each delivery includes wine education cards with tasting notes, pairing suggestions, wine origin, and even the best serving temperature for each bottle. And best of all, you don't have to leave your home. You just let the right wines come to you. It's perfect for the at-home date night or the daily dinner pairing. And best of all, if you just click that link down below or you head over to brightsellers.com/DeFranco, you take their 7-question quiz, they'll give you 50% off your first 6-bottle box. And the first bit of awesome is today's show is so big that I wanted to include, it was not really a serious story in today's show, but once again, there was a lot to cover today. And so if you'd like me to cover that Twitch sub-shaming story that was all over the place, which I still feel like it has to be a troll, I uploaded my reaction and response to that over at youtube.com/DeFrancoDoes, which, hey, it gave me a reason to use that channel after 8 months. You can check that out after today's show. Then, in another bit of awesome, as you may be able to tell from the bags under my eyes, I woke up at 1 a.m. this morning. I'm very tired now. I was unable to go back to sleep, but it gave me the time to finish Final Fantasy VII Remake, and oh my god. I know the last time I gushed about this, but having finished it, I have to say, if you played the original, you were a fan of the original, you need to play this. I don't want to ruin anything, but stuff in this game has huge implications for how the story continues. So yeah, there's that. Then Wired gave us Every Dog Breed Explained Part 2. We had John Krasinski throwing a quarantine prom with Billie Eilish and the Jonas Brothers. We also saw Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman join the All-In Challenge, which, fantastically, last time we talked about it, had raised over $4 million. As of recording this video, over $13.7 million has been raised. So you just love to see it. Also, on the note of Hugh Jackman, we got a trailer for his new HBO film, Bad Education. And if you want to see the full versions of everything I just shared, the secret link of the day, really anything at all, links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about the coronavirus protests we're seeing in the States here, starting off with this standoff that has gone viral. Now, notably, that scene was from a protest yesterday in Denver. There we saw 2 medical workers blocking lines of trucks and cars as people try to protest Colorado's social distancing laws. Right, those people calling for an end to lockdown measures and for non-essential businesses to reopen. You might remember last week we saw similar protests at Michigan's capital, and since then we've seen demonstrators protesting stay-at-home orders in at least 20 different states. This including Texas, Maryland, Minnesota, Virginia, Tennessee, and Arizona. And like we saw with Michigan, in a lot of these protests you had people staying in their cars, social distancing themselves from others, but you also had scenes like this where people were definitely not social distancing. And one of the biggest examples of that was in Texas, where on Saturday hundreds of people crowded around one another without their masks, some even bringing their kids. There you had people shouting things like "Let us work" and "Fire Fauci," also holding up signs that read "You have no right to keep me out of church." And to give an example of some of the thinking there, we saw one of the protesters say,
"I think about the fear that was instilled in me from the initial shock of the outbreak, and it was too much. I don't even get sick hardly anyways. I'm not gonna catch the virus. I'm not rubbing up on people, coughing on people in public. You know, I'm not worried about transmitting a virus that's just like another flu."
But, of course, health experts have repeatedly been telling people that this virus is not like the flu. 1, it's completely new. 2, it's believed that people who aren't showing symptoms can spread it. And 3, there's also no vaccine at this moment. And I'll repeat what I said last week, right? All of this is not to say that these people do not have legitimate concerns and issues. 22 million people have lost their jobs. More will follow. Many don't have the money to pay for rent or other bills. But on the other side of this, you have people like Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who has argued protests like this may only cause the stay-at-home orders to be extended. And connected to that kind of thinking, we've also seen experts say that if you go back too soon, thus supercharging the spread, this is going to decimate the economy anyway. Right now, I don't mean at the same rate, I mean even worse. Now, with all that said, of course, there was support for the protesters, some of it even seemingly coming from President Trump, who on Friday tweeted, "Liberate Minnesota, then liberate Michigan, and liberate Virginia." And with that, we saw Washington Governor Jay Inslee criticize Trump, saying, "The president's statements this morning encourage illegal and dangerous acts. He is putting millions of people in danger of contracting COVID-19. His unhinged rantings and calls for people to, quote, liberate states could also lead to violence. We've seen it before." And adding, "The president is fomenting domestic rebellion and spreading lies." Even while his own administration says the virus is real, it is deadly, and we have a long way to go before restrictions can be lifted. Though yesterday we also saw Trump respond again to the protesters, saying that some governors had enacted lockdown orders that were too tough.
People feel that way. You're allowed to protest. I mean, they feel that way. I watched the protest and they were all 6 feet apart. I mean, it was a very orderly group of people. But, you know, some have gone too far. Some governors have gone too far. Some of the things that happened are maybe not so appropriate. And I think in the end it's not going to matter because we're starting to open up our states. and I think they're going to open up very well.
And on the complete opposite end of this, we've also seen states start to reopen. Notably, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis giving the green light to some cities and counties to reopen beaches. While people aren't allowed to sunbathe, they can still walk, swim, and even fish. And with that, on Saturday, we saw people just flocking to the beach, one of the biggest examples being Jacksonville. I mean, it was just crowded. And of course, with this, we've seen a lot of pushback. And this because the same day that decision was made, Florida recorded a record number of cases. But also, Florida's not the only state in the process of reopening. We have Minnesota. There we saw Governor Tim Walz signing an executive order reopening outdoor recreational businesses like golf courses and bait shops. Also New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey announcing they would begin reopening marinas and boat yards. You also have Texas, which is expected to lift some restrictions later this week by allowing what Governor Greg Abbott calls retail to go, which basically means that non-essential businesses can deliver or have customers pick up merchandise, but they won't allow anyone to actually shop in store. Also, regarding the timing, all of this comes as governors have criticized Trump for not doing enough to help states when it comes to testing, that including providing things like swabs, reagents, and other chemical solutions required to run tests. Right now, the United States has been averaging about 146,000 tests a day, but state officials and public health experts have said that is not enough, arguing that the number needs to be in the several hundred thousands or even millions each day. And on this topic, I mean, last week, researchers at Harvard estimated that in order to ease restrictions, testing needs to triple its current pace. But at the same time, though, Trump has said that the governors are responsible for testing, and also saying,
the United States has the most robust, advanced, and accurate testing system anywhere in the world.
However, later we saw Maryland Governor Larry Hogan pushing back against those claims.
To try to push this off to say that the governors have plenty of testing and they should just get to work on testing, somehow we aren't doing our job, is just absolutely false. Every governor in America has been pushing and fighting and clawing to get more tests, not only from the federal government, but from every private lab in America and from all across the world.
We also saw from Virginia Governor and physician Ralph Northam.
We've been fighting for testing. It's not a straightforward test. We don't even have enough swabs, believe it or not, and we're ramping that up. But for the national level to say that we have what we need, and really to have no guidance to the state levels, it's just irresponsible because we're not there yet.
And others, like Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, have argued that only the federal government has the decision to tell the FDA to prioritize companies that are, quote, putting a slightly different formula together. With DeWine going on to say that if the FDA would do that, he could probably double or even triple testing in Ohio. And actually, following concerns like that, yesterday we saw Donald Trump say,
we also are going to be using, and we're preparing to use, the Defense Production Act to increase swab production in one U.S. facility by over 20 million additional swabs per month. We've had a little difficulty with one, so we're going to call in, as we have in the past, as you know, we're calling in the Defense Production Act, and we'll be getting swabs very easily. Swabs are easy.
Trump also defending himself and hitting back against those governors again.
We have millions of them coming in. They're very easy. By comparison, and in all fairness, governors could get them themselves. They really could. All of this. But we're going to do it. We're going to work with the governors, and if they can't do it, we're going to do it.
And then, just this morning, we saw Trump further criticizing Democratic governors, accusing them of playing a very dangerous political game. So that is a chunk of what we're seeing in the United States. But also, with all of this, I want to point out that the United States isn't the only country where people are protesting coronavirus restrictions. Over the weekend, we saw hundreds of people in major Brazilian cities coming out to demonstrate against restrictions imposed by governors who have shut down businesses. And one of the most notable protests was in Brasilia in front of the Army's headquarters, where around 600 demonstrators gathered, many of whom were not wearing any masks or protective gear. And according to reports, like in the United States, the protesters were mostly right-wing supporters of President Jair Bolsonaro. And in addition to calling to end the restrictions, the protesters reportedly demanded the closure of the Supreme Court and Congress, and also calling on the military to step in and handle the pandemic. So, basically calling for a military coup. And what made this protest even more significant is the fact that Bolsonaro himself actually showed up to give a speech. Like many protesters, he didn't wear a mask or gloves, even coughing multiple times during his speech. And while Bolsonaro himself did not directly call for Congress to be closed or for there to be a military coup, his appearance was still a huge deal for a number of reasons. First of all, Brazil was under a military rule for over 2 decades, from 1964 to 1985, so calls to give the military more power are highly controversial there. And to that point, we saw tons of people criticizing Bolsonaro, including the likes of former presidents, politicians, and newspaper editorial boards. Reportedly, even top military officials told local newspapers they were upset with the move. And another reason this is significant is because it's part of Bolsonaro's continued efforts to downplay the coronavirus and actively defy his government. This, even though Brazil has the highest number number of confirmed cases in all of Latin America, with over 39,000 cases and 2,500 deaths as of this afternoon. But despite that, not only has Bolsonaro openly opposed lockdowns imposed by governors, which he has ironically called dictatorial, he's also gone against social distancing measures advised by both the WHO and Brazil's health ministry numerous times. In the last few weeks, he stepped up his public appearances, meeting with supporters and protesters as well as business owners and others. Also, on Thursday, he even fired his health minister just because he had urged Brazilians to socially distance and stay inside. A move he made despite the fact that a survey from the first week of April showed that a huge majority of Brazilians, about 76%, approved of the health minister's handling of the crisis. And in fact, in a poll published this Saturday, it showed that a majority of people approved the government's regulations despite the impact on the economy. And while Brazil is a really wild and unique situation with everything going on with Bolsonaro, there are also plenty of other similar protests around the world. Anti-lockdown riots broke out in Paris. There, rioters reportedly threw fireworks at police who responded with tear gas. Last week, tens of thousands of migrant workers who were stranded without work or a way to get home held demonstrations in Mumbai, India. There have also reportedly been protests breaking out in Lebanon and Iraq. And those last two are really notable because before this whole situation, there were protests and movements happening. Right before this pandemic, there had been a surge of movements all around the world. And one of the common threads, you had people protesting government corruption and economic injustice, demanding reform. When the pandemic hit, a lot of those protests largely died out. But now, many experts are saying that these movements are likely to start up again or spread to other parts of the world for two main reasons. First is the economic downturn that the coronavirus has caused and is continuing to cause globally. Numerous experts, including the UN Secretary General, have warned that the economic situation risks increased social unrest and violence, with some saying this is something we're going to see disproportionately in poorer countries that can't afford subsidies for lost jobs and other similar social safety nets. And the second reason we could see more protests is the fact that some leaders out there are using the coronavirus to expand authoritarian measures. A little while back, we talked about how Hungary passed a law allowing the prime minister to rule by decree indefinitely. Kenya also started crackdowns on people breaking curfew, and those crackdowns have now killed more people in the country than the coronavirus. Israel has also used the pandemic to significantly expand its surveillance state. In fact, already we saw protests breaking out in Israel over the weekend against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There, more than 2,000 protesters took to the street, notably standing 6 feet apart, with the demonstrators accusing Netanyahu of using the crisis to escape prosecution over corruption charges and form an emergency government with his rival. Some reportedly holding up black flags to symbolize what they see as Netanyahu's attack against the country's democratic system. Like we talked about before, Netanyahu was charged with fraud, breach of justice, and accepting bribes, but according to reports, he's recently used the pandemic to, quote, gain more control over judicial appointments and assurances that he can remain in office even if he gives up the prime minister's job in a proposed power-sharing arrangement. And to that point, while I was recording, we got the update that Netanyahu and his rival, Benny Gantz, agreed to form an emergency government together. Under that agreement, Netanyahu will serve as prime minister until October 2021. Then Gantz will take over. And this is a huge deal because, one, it's finally a resolution to the 3 elections Israel has had in the last year because their leaders were unable to form a government. And two, because Netanyahu is serving the first term, it means that he'll continue to fight the corruption charges from the prime minister's office, which gives him certain powers. Right, so we're seeing that internationally, but also we're seeing countries starting to open back up. Just today we saw Germany, Denmark, the Czech Republic, and Norway all lifting some restrictions. Outside of Europe, we saw South Korea also easing social distancing rules. Australia and New Zealand have also said that they are going to roll back some restrictions soon. This, despite the fact that New Zealand also said it's extending its lockdown for 5 more days. With this, it's going to be interesting and really, somewhat nerve-wracking to watch what happens as restrictions are pulled back. But for now, like with almost every topic right now, we're going to have to wait to see what happens next. And the last thing I want to talk about today is actually relatively brief, but it's only brief because we're still getting information. If you have not already heard, there was a tragic and horrifying shooting in Nova Scotia. There was a gunman who was disguised as a police officer who shot and killed people in their homes. The AP currently reporting that 18 people have died, making it the deadliest shooting in Canadian history. According to reports, the suspect is among the dead, so is a police officer's reports also saying that he set houses on fire and that the rampage lasted around 12 hours. As of right now, no motive is known, but authorities say that it is possible the initial victims were initially targeted and the rest were random. Authorities also adding that bodies were found inside and outside of a house on the street where authorities believe the suspect lived, and then more were also found at other locations within 30 miles of the neighborhood. Now, given the timing of this with the coronavirus pandemic, as far as how will people mourn, we saw Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau say,
"The pandemic will prevent us from mourning together in person, but a vigil will be held virtually to celebrate the lives of the victims."
That vigil is set to be held online on Friday, with Trudeau also saying,
"I know that the vast majority of Nova Scotians will have a direct link with one or more of the many victims, and the entire province and the entire country is grieving right now as we come to grips with something that is absolutely unimaginable.
Also, I will say something I was happy to see. Justin Trudeau also requested that the media refrain from naming the suspect to avoid giving him any attention. You know, that's something that we've talked about on the show for a very long time, not giving these monsters the attention that many of them crave. But like I said in the beginning, this is brief. This is still a developing situation. We're waiting for more information to come out, including more details about the victims. But for now, that's where this story ends, and we'll have to wait to see what other information comes out. And if I can end this on any note, I want to hit two final things. One, my thoughts, my well wishes, my love to all of those beautiful bastards. Hope you've had a fantastic Monday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. And a quick note before we get started. After constant demand, especially recently because things have gotten incredibly stupid, I'm launching, as of this video coming out, the limited edition Don't Be Stupid shirt. Because apparently people have just missed the message over the past few years, we decided to essentially put it on a neon sign. It's now available for you on premium shirts in a variety of colors, hoodies with a plethora of color options, and tank tops with, wouldn't you know it, a number of colors. So if you want to snag one of those, it's one of the top 2 links in the description down below. But with that said, welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is entertainment pop culture news, specifically about and surrounding rapper 6ix9ine, aka Daniel Hernandez. And as you may or may not remember, this guy was facing a number of charges. Right? People were talking about him facing up to 30 plus or even life in prison. Right? But then he ends up pleading guilty to racketeering and a number of charges. He starts cooperating with the authorities. While publicly that made his name synonymous with snitching, with ratting, legally it reduced his sentence to just 24 months in prison with 5 years supervised release. And then he actually ended up getting released early last month due to the coronavirus. Right? So he's released, he's put under house arrest, but he is allowed to make and put out music. And over the weekend, that is exactly what we saw, and he did it in record-setting fashion. One, he made his general public return on Instagram Live and just crushed the Instagram Live record. The previous records were in the hundreds of thousands, and Hernandez got 2 million concurrent. Right, and in that live stream, in addition to him kind of egging on the people he called haters.
And I seen everything. Everybody want to be quiet now. For 2 years, y'all made fun of me. Y'all done made memes of me. Y'all done threw my name in the dirt, yo rat bitch, fucking y'all didn't go through what I went through, and I still came home, and I'm a legend at the age of 24 years old because I came home and a rat is doing more numbers than you. I would be mad too. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
He also defended himself regarding the snitching label, essentially saying, why would I be loyal to people that weren't loyal to me and also were actively hurting me?
If there is a street code, right? If there is a street code and there's something so-called as loyalty and everything and no snitching and all of that, I get it, right? But where was the loyalty when you was sleeping with my baby mother? Where was the loyalty when you was caught on the wiretap trying to kill me? Where was the loyalty when you tried to kidnap my mother? Where was the loyalty when you was stealing millions of dollars from me? Where was that? So who broke it first? I get it. Don't fight fire with fire. I'm sorry. But what did I do wrong? Be loyal to that's fucking my baby moms? Be loyal to that kidnap me? Beat the shit out of me on video and everything?
And ultimately promoting his new music video for Gooba that was out on YouTube. And that push was incredibly effective because not only as of recording this video is he at 97 million views and counting on this thing that was just released on Friday, he reportedly got the most views in the first day of a hip-hop song on YouTube with 43 million, beating the previous record holder Eminem for Kill Shot, which of course was his Machine Gun Kelly diss back in 2018, which, I mean, wow, those are insane numbers. And with that said, even though all views are essentially equal, it is also important with this story to look into, well, how many people are watching it because they like him? And so for that, we look to the likes versus the dislikes, and there we see 4.2 million likes, 453,000 dislikes. It's actually a very warm welcome, all things considered. But of course, those dislikes aren't something to scoff at, especially because the general idea of hate towards him, you get into dangerous territory. I mean, essentially there is this understanding that he has a massive target on his back. And to make this an even more concerning situation for him, over the weekend he was doxxed. And according to his attorney, he has now had to relocate because his home address was leaked. But ultimately, that is where we are with the situation, and it's gonna be a very interesting one to watch. I mean, for a number of reasons. But with that said, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on this situation in general in those comments down below. But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and Today in Awesome, brought to you by Raycon. And Raycon, if you don't know, was founded on the belief that premium audio should be affordable without excessive price markup. So a bunch of audio engineers and some of music's industry elites started Raycon to develop a truly awesome line of wireless earbuds at nearly half the price. And their everyday E25 earbuds are easily their best model yet. With 6 hours of playing time, a compact carrying case of your own, just go to Reunion. We also got a Reunion and Converse. See the full versions of everything of Break-In and his 34-year-old link down below, but briefly to give you a quick condensed summary. On February 23rd, Arbery reportedly went out jogging in the coastal town of Brunswick, Georgia. A little bit later, someone calls 911 saying that Arbery is in a house that was under construction. You also had another person, 64-year-old Gregory McMichael, saying that he thought Arbery was the culprit behind a recent series of break-ins. He and his 34-year-old son, Travis, then grab their guns. They go chase Arbery down the road in their truck, all before allegedly gunning him down and killing him. Right, and after that, you had tons of people confused, outraged. Why did this happen? And that grew even more when last Tuesday, a video of the incident leaked. And notably, from that incident in February all the way to last Thursday, the McMichaels were never charged with Arbery's death. But after the show, Thursday night, we see the Georgia Bureau of Investigation announce that it had arrested both Gregory and Travis McMichael for Arbery's murder. The next morning, the GBI held a press conference where we saw Director Vic Reynolds say,
"I'm very comfortable in telling you that there's more than sufficient probable cause in this case for felony murder."
And at that press conference, Reynolds also addressed questions about potentially arresting a third person. And that's because, according to a former prosecutor on this case, another man joined the McMichaels in hot pursuit of Arbery. And currently, that's believed to be William Bryan, who filmed that leaked video. And regarding Bryan, Reynolds said that he, along with others, is being investigated. While Reynolds said that more arrests could be made, he also stressed that the agency is going to be guided by facts before making any more arrests. It's also important to note here that Bryan's lawyer also said that Bryan has fully cooperated with the investigation and that he is simply a witness to the tragic shooting, and adding that there had been a number of crimes in the neighborhood, and Bryan didn't recognize Arbery, and a vehicle that he did recognize was following Arbery. But seemingly countering that testimony, according to the police report, Gregory McMichael said that Bryan actually attempted to block Arbery as the men pursued him, but was unsuccessful. Now, on top of that, one of the other big developments we saw in this case was that on Saturday, several local outlets published more footage of Arbery just before his death. In that footage, you can see what appears to be Arbery going into a house that was under construction. He's only there for a few minutes, he doesn't appear to take anything, and then a separate piece of footage, another person runs up to a stand of trees across the street and appears to be watching what's going on. And ultimately, that footage ends with Arbery leaving and just running back down the street. Now, after this, you had the Georgia Bureau of Investigation confirming that this video is part of its investigation, but notably, they wouldn't say if the figure in the video was in fact Arbery. However, later on Saturday, you did have the attorney for Arbery's family, Lee Merritt, saying in a statement that his office believes the person in the video is Arbery, saying he engaged in no illegal activity and remained for only a brief period. Ahmaud did not take anything from the construction site, he did not cause any damage to the property, and going on to add, Ahmaud's actions at this empty home under construction were in no way a felony under Georgia law. This video confirms that Mr. Arbery's murder was not justified, and the actions of the men who pursued him and ambushed him were unjustified. Now, in this time, we also saw more videos showing a man that could be Arbery at that house at night. Some of these videos reportedly from as far back as October 2019. However, I should note here, this video has not yet actually been confirmed to be Arbery, and we don't actually know why this man was there. Currently, there's little information and large-scale reporting on it. And in fact, according to an Atlanta-based criminal defense lawyer, even though Arbery was in this home, that's not necessarily a crime. And even if it was considered one, it would be a misdemeanor unless he was found to have taken it. And the reason I mention that is actually very important because according to Georgia law, a citizen can only arrest a person if that person is committing a felony. And on top of that, even if it was a felony, which we are not saying that it is, they reportedly would only be able to use reasonable force to detain a person unless they're preventing a forcible felony or using self-defense. But of course, the McMichaels allegedly initiated this attack with their guns, which is why we saw that Atlanta-based lawyers say, if you initiate an assault, you don't get to then claim self-defense if the other person reacts to them being assaulted. Also, we should talk about the person that actually owns this home, Larry English. We've seen him telling media outlets that his construction site was not robbed, saying, I've never had a police report or anything stolen from my property or any kind of robbery. Also, very notably, according to Glenn County police records, there have not been any recent burglaries in the neighborhood except for one filed on January 1st when someone stole a handgun from an unlocked truck parked at the McMichaels' house. And all of that brings us to yesterday, where we saw Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr asking the Department of Justice to investigate how local authorities handled this case. You know, like we talked about on Thursday, you had not one but two prosecutors recusing themselves for potential conflicts of interest because they had professional connections to Gregory McMichael. Notably, that second prosecutor, George Barnhill, also advised police not to arrest the McMichaels as he was removing himself from the investigation. At that time, saying it appears their intent was to stop and hold this criminal suspect until law enforcement arrived. Under Georgia law, this is perfectly legal. It's also now come out that Barnhill reportedly told detectives that Arbery's killing was a justifiable homicide. This, even though now you have the GBI director saying they have sufficient probable cause for murder. And actually, this morning we saw the DOJ saying that it is considering AG Carr's request. And according to spokesperson Carrie Kupek, the DOJ is actually assessing all of the evidence to determine whether federal hate crime charges are appropriate. You know, as we've seen new developments, we've also seen new reactions. Some of the notable ones including Michael B. Jordan saying, I'm sick to my stomach and could barely watch the video. Another one of our future kings and leaders was murdered. We also saw Taylor Swift saying, I'm absolutely devastated and horrified by the senseless, cold-blooded, racially motivated killing of Ahmaud Arbery. We also saw the likes of Jay-Z, Alicia Keys, Yo Gotti, and Meek Mill all penning a letter through Rock Nation, addressing Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, AG Carr, the third prosecutor in the case, Tom Durden. They're calling the arrest of the McMichaels a positive step on the long road toward justice, adding, but it only strengthens our resolve to see that justice justice is eventually served. In it, they also call for Durden to recuse himself and for Carr to appoint a special prosecutor. And actually, just this morning, we're now seeing reports that Durden will step aside, and that Cobb County District Attorney Joyette Holmes has now been appointed to lead the prosecution against the McMichaels. And ultimately, that is where we are right now. Obviously, we're going to wait to see what happens next, but I do want to note something. Right, that's the story, and this is me giving an opinion. The number of people I've seen using the video of Arbery looking through a house on construction and using that as a justification for him being shot and killed, that's disgusting, it's ridiculous, and it saddens me. No weapon, no stolen property was found on his body. From all the videos that we've seen released thus far, it does not appear that he stole anything, nor should that be something that justifies what happened to this man. Also, people can project and assume why this man was on the property. It's very easy to do, but it doesn't solidify anything. But hell, as a much younger man with nothing else better to do, I've walked construction sites before. And of course, as always with these things, understand, I say this while open to more information, open to more evidence, open to a further investigation. But ultimately, with this story, of course, I do want to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on this story and why? And then let's talk about a big story that really is a piece of a much larger topic that we're going to be talking about over the coming months, and that is lockdown and reopening. So if you haven't seen, Tesla has filed a lawsuit against Alameda County in California, arguing that its Fremont factory should be allowed to operate during the coronavirus pandemic under the governor's new guidance for reopening some businesses. And some background here, that factory has actually been shut down since March 23rd after the county called for its closure as part of social distancing measures and stay-at-home orders, but the company has been pushing to resume production. Right, so you have that situation, and then this last Thursday we see California Governor Gavin Newsom announcing that he's going to allow for sectors like retail, manufacturing, and logistics to reopen with, quote, modifications that reduce risk. However, and this is a big point here, he stressed that local officials still have the authority to speed up or slow down reopening at the county level. So then, the next thing we see is that on Saturday, Tesla CEO Elon Musk expresses his frustration publicly about local resistance Tesla has faced. With Musk announcing on Twitter, Tesla is filing a lawsuit against Alameda County immediately. The unelected and ignorant interim health officer of Alameda is acting contrary to the governor, the president, our constitutional freedoms, and just plain common sense. Then adding, frankly, this is the final straw. Tesla will now move its HQ and future programs to Texas/Nevada immediately. If we even retain Fremont manufacturing activity at all, it will be dependent on how Tesla is treated in the future. Tesla is the last car maker left in California. Right, and Elon's frustration here isn't seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, it was reported late last month that he ranted about stay-at-home orders in the company's April 29th first quarter earnings call, on it reportedly calling the restrictions fascist and a violation of people's constitutional rights. Also, we saw the same day that Musk tweeted his threat, Tesla released a blog post about how it will get its employees back to work safely. And in that post, the company notes that it's the last major car maker in the state, as well as one of its largest manufacturing employers with more than 10,000 workers at its Fremont factory and 20,000 statewide. With Tesla again arguing that its Fremont plant should be allowed to reopen under Newsom's recent guidelines, but it also said that it should have always had permission to continue production because the state and federal government classifies vehicle manufacturing as national critical infrastructure. With the company also arguing that Alameda County, where our factory resides, and Santa Clara County next door have stated in their return to work order FAQs that the manufacturing of distributed energy resources, which is defined in state law to include electric vehicles, solar, and battery storage, is permitted to resume. And along with these points, the company explained that it has worked hard on a robust restart plan, saying it was modeled after the comprehensive return to work plan we established at our Shanghai Gigafactory, which has seen smooth and healthy operations for the last 3 months. Also noting that these restrictions are being laid on them not for a lack of trying or transparency, and this because they said that they met and collaborated on restart plans with Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency. But then also claiming that the county public health officer making decisions about reopening has not returned their calls or their emails, which they say listed out detailed restart plans, factory layouts, and more. And so saying that the county's position left them no choice but to take legal action. Now following this, we saw Fremont Mayor Lily May responding to Tesla Saturday afternoon saying, as the local shelter-in-place order continues without major provisions for major manufacturing activity such as Tesla to resume, I am growing concerned about the potential implications for our regional economy. And adding, we know many essential businesses have proven they can successfully operate using strict safety and social distancing practices. I strongly believe these same practices could be possible for other manufacturing businesses, especially those that are so critical to our employment base. He then encouraged the county to work with local businesses to reopen with acceptable guidelines. And shortly after, we saw Alameda County's health department release a statement saying it had engaged in a collaborative good faith effort to develop and implement a safety plan that allows for a reopening while protecting Tesla workers. Adding, we look forward to coming to an agreement on an appropriate safety plan very soon. However, it stressed that, quote, it is our collective responsibility to move through the phases of reopening and loosening the restrictions of the shelter-in-place order in the safest way possible, guided by data and science. We also notably heard from Scott Haggerty, supervisor for the Fremont District of Alameda County, who spoke with the New York Times on Saturday, and he explained, quote, we were working on a lot of policies and procedures to help operate that plant, and quite